Good morning. We hope that you are enjoying this nice cold weather and that everyone is staying safe and warm this morning. I'm here today with Susan Barkley. We're going to talk a little bit about Munis project codes. So let's get started. Okay. In Kentucky, nearly 20 years ago, we did establish project codes for the implementation of Munis. And that project code, according to the chart of account, that can be a 4 to 5 character value. The first 3 characters in that project code identify the project. The 4th character identifies the fiscal year, and then you can also have a 5th character that could further define that project. And sometimes that 5th character is put on there maybe by KDE for a federal or state grant, and it can also be used locally. With that implementation, districts used that numbering convention, and little changed over the course of the years until FY05. So in 2005, we had to start reusing those Munis project codes. And in order to do that, Munis added functionality, and districts had to begin to perform extra tasks, those tasks that we all love. I remember those well: to purge GL history, move projects with recent history to a Z status, mass delete, and mass create projects. Now, the most difficult thing comes with moving projects if you've had recent activity. That is what we move to a Z status, and that can take a good amount of time to get through that. So we are now looking at some new features with Munis version 10.3, and that's includes database normalization, which creates relationships between the data within the database. And these new relationships mean that districts must perform additional tasks if you want to reuse project numbers. Now, we've always said, you want to purge the requisitions, purchase orders, and, along with 10.3 has come with updating employees with the old accounts. So if you are getting rid of accounts for 10-year-old projects, then you may end up also with version 10.3 having to update employees with old account numbers. Now, the future Munis versions beyond 10.3 will also require additional tasks. Okay, to alleviate the burden on districts to reuse those project codes, we looked for a different way of handling them. Now, we had a few options that we tossed about. One of those was to renumber the grants on the KDE chart of accounts and try to use a 2-digit year. Now, in doing this, we would end up having to make some changes to the Kentucky-specific programs and reports, and it would be very disruptive to districts as we're already using that 5th character in many of the grants the way they stand. The second option that we considered was to request that Munis change that project code field to extend it to 6 characters. This would end up being a huge cost to change hundreds of programs and reports, and even if we were able to get that done, there may not be enough real estate on the current reports to hold that 6-digit project number. So what would happen is we would end up having 2 lines of data for 1. And that makes for some very messy looking reports, so we were trying to look for another option. Now, a third option was to migrate to the Munis project ledger functionality. This is a newer functionality with up to 8 characters that would be able to use for a project. Now, this requires changing all Kentucky-specific programs and reports and would be a large migration effort for districts, and it would be much like the initial implementation to Munis in 1995 when we started. As far as the Fund 2 would go, it would be a huge undertaking for districts to do that. So that is another one that we just weren't willing to go in and do. Okay, now the option 4, and this is the option that we are discussing, and this will go into effect with the FY15 reporting. We will begin using an alpha code to represent the fiscal year starting with A for 2015. So, for example, for Title I, which is now 3104 for 2014, in 2015 it would be 310A. A would represent fiscal year 15. An example of IDEA B would be 3371. That would be the project code for FY15 for IDEA B. You would use the letter B for FY16, the letter C for FY17. Now, the advantages to this is that project codes are now recycled every 25 years. Now, there are 26 letters in the alphabet, we do know that, but we would not be using the letter X because X is already being used in general fund projects to represent general fund expenditures. Like 310X represents Title I, the general fund expenditures for that. So we would skip over X. Now, there would be no changes required for the Kentucky-specific programs or reports by using letters. Another good thing is that districts would no longer be required to purge transactions, POs, payroll for the next 25 years, and there's no need to move projects to a Z status. This would reduce the existing burden on districts because you're going to have less steps to take in order to get your Fund 2 budget ready. Now, we know there are some disadvantages, one of which, if you have already taken steps to create your accounts and you are using 5 in that fourth digit, then you would need to go in and do an account change to make that fourth digit an A. We also know that it will take a little bit for districts to get used to that numbering convention. And we know that especially in large districts where you've got distributed entry and people are entering their own account numbers, we know that that's going to take a little time for everyone to get used to. Now, does that solve all the problems by using that letter? And the answer is no. But what it does do is provide us a 25-year span of time that will allow us to determine or prepare an alternate solution if necessary. And of course, who knows what's going to happen in 25 years? Munis could look totally different, and this could be a non-issue at that time. Now, one thing that we still want you to be aware of, this does not do away with developing a purge process. You do want to get on a purge schedule. You want to make sure and get rid of requisitions, purchase orders, GL history transactions. You know, it is still best practice to develop that purge schedule. But you will not have to purge payroll information or change account numbers on existing payroll data that you need to keep, which will save you a lot of time. Now, we know that this is going to be a huge transition for some, but we want to make that as simple as possible. And by using the letter, that is going to actually cut down on the amount of time that you're having to spend to get your Fund 2 budget prepared. We do want to take some questions, and I forgot to remind you of the email address, but send those questions to my email address, and Susan Barkley is going to help as we get those questions and get those answered for you. But just send questions to that email address, and we will get started answering those. Okay, do we have any questions, Susan?
We do. We already have some questions. The first question is, what is the recommended method for districts to use to identify existing general fund accounts, the ones with a project code with an X in the fourth position, after this change takes place? And Sheila, I think you've already addressed that.
Yes, that is in the documentation. We will not be using the letter X. That is already taken up for the general fund expenditures, so X will not be used at all. There will be no changes.
Okay, another question we've received. How do you number grants that require multiple project numbers? For example, it now requires, Title I now requires projects 3104 and 3104M. We have several grants that require this setup, so how would we handle that?
Okay, that's very simple too. All we would need to do on that is for 3104, which was Title I FY14, to use that for FY15, it would be 310A, and then for the M after it would be 310AM. That would identify that 2015 grant.
Okay, another question. Does each district get to choose their option, or is KDE forcing us to use option 4? Okay,
everyone would have to use that option. You well, everyone will have to conform to that beginning in FY15. That is not an option. We will be using an A in the fourth position of that. And we do know that that is going to be a little bit of work to get used to. We understand. I came from a district, I worked in a district for more than 20 years, and I know that it's going to take a little bit of getting used to. But we hope, that after, a few months' time, people will catch on to that coding system. And what it's going to do is save you a tremendous amount of time in getting your Fund 2 budget ready. So.
Another question, this is a two-parter, so I'll
Okay.
handle this in two separate ones. Since we will still be able to purge/delete old project numbers if we elect to do so, will there be instructions forthcoming on version 10.3 to do that?
Okay,
To purge or delete old project numbers?
Okay, you will not have to go through and purge or delete those old project numbers. You want to keep that accounting there. With any information as far as purging your purchase orders, requisitions, you can go ahead and do those. And there is information out there. Actually, we had a CASBO session in the fall on purging data, cleaning up things, and we're going to present that at the spring CASBO also. The process is the same in 10.3 as it is in 9.3. And, you will want to develop a schedule to get rid of those old transactions like POs and requisitions.
The second part to that question, is there a need to update employees with old accounts if the employee is inactive?
Since we're going to this using a letter, you will not have to once we start this. You're not going to be reusing those numbers. We're not going to be deleting those accounts. So no, you will not have to go through and get rid of those or change the account numbers on that once we move to this convention.
A district is asking, why is option 1 not the best option? They feel like that wouldn't be any more disruptive than changing that fourth digit to a letter. And something I noticed while you were speaking, on options 2 and 3, that was definitely an economic
Yes.
disadvantage there because it would have required so much change to our Kentucky-specific reports.
Exactly. Yes. Now, option 1, to use that 2-digit year at the end, we are already using the 2 digits or using the 5 digits for many of the chart of accounts or the projects on the chart of accounts. So in order to move from that, then all the existing ones with letters would have to be renumbered. We are already running close to not having enough numbers for projects, so the more we add, we really need that 5th character to identify those grants, and you may have something to add on that, Susan, as far as the chart of accounts.
Yes, we did take a look at those project codes to see how many project codes were already assigned by KDE on the 5th digit, and just a quick glance through, there were at least 65 project codes that were already pre-assigned by using that 5th digit. And then we have no idea really how many of those 5th digits are being assigned locally by different school districts, and they could be assigned for different purposes as well. So in order to change those project codes for at least 100 grants, we felt like that was very disruptive to districts and would be more of a risk of miscoding than simply changing the 5 to an A. We've had some folks say that they were having a little trouble seeing the webcast and asking for the link to the archive, and you will be sending that out afterwards.
Yes, we always will send out that archive link. So when this is ready this afternoon, at the latest tomorrow morning, you will be getting the link to the webcast.
Okay, another question. Will KDE be updating the Purging GL account history, MSA 3, and the Mass Create New Projects and Accounts, BGL5 documents?
We will keep documents updated. We're working on some things now. But again, with this, you're not going to have to rush around and do any of that purging at this time because we will be using letters beginning with your 15 budget.
Okay, here's another good question. How will this impact the coding of SFCC on behalf portions of bond payments? We currently use the last 2 numbers of the year to identify the bond issue, such as SF09. Also, the capital account transfer to the general fund uses letters in the 4th position, such as COFT.
Okay, these are within different funds. That's not going to affect that numbering system at all. So if you are using SF14 to identify your bond sale that you had in 2014, or if you have one in 2016, that's not going to change because that is part of the debt service fund and not part of Fund 2. And the same goes for any other fund, the COFT and the BFFT. That would be the same thing. It's not going to affect those.
Okay, another question. Will I have to change the year character on any of the FY14 grants?
No. You do not have to do anything to prior grants. FY14 will remain, for example, 3104 would identify Title I, 2014.
We have received a concern from a district about possible miscoding and the fact that we would be using an alpha character, so you couldn't just simply stay on your numbering keypad, which
exactly.
I like to add fast. I like to use the numbering keypad, and
Yes.
we realize that you can't do that. Do you have any suggestions to help folks avoid miscoding?
Well, what I always did when I was at the district was, print out list of codes for employees that needed those when they were coding their own transactions. And I always kept a list for myself if there were some new things going on, new grants. So I would suggest just getting the information out there early, giving people a list of their accounts. If it's SBDM or grant funds, just go ahead and get them some information out there so they will know which codes to use.
Okay, we don't have any other questions at this time, so if you have a question, please send it in to Sheila's email. That's at the bottom of the screen. I think it's important for us to just reiterate why we're having to make this change and why we can't just continue to operate as we have been.
Right. With version 10.3, the database normalization, it's going in and connecting basically account numbers to everything. Where years ago you may have been able to the system would have let you enter an account on something that maybe didn't exist. Where now that's not going to happen. Everything is going to tie together. And if we're using an account, say 2014 grant, and there's 2004 data still out there, it skews things. And I will tell you, I worked with many districts back in, I guess, in early spring, who were developing their budgets for FY14 and thought they had gotten rid of all of 2004 data when in fact they hadn't. So, Susan, that was a lot of trouble. We had to even send some districts on to Munis to get some of that database straightened out because they assumed they had not used a 2004 project when in reality they did. And it created a lot of problems. Now, I know it's going to be a big transition and we all understand that. But this will save time in the long run with not having to go through that purge process the way we've had to for the past 20 years. So I think once everyone gets used to this, I think it will be a lot better.
Yes, change is never easy.
No, it's not.
Another question that we received, how will this affect project numbers for district activity funds? District activity fund project codes are not set by KDE. So districts really have complete control over how they use those district activity fund project codes. If you record those in Fund 2, you have the option of putting them just in your Fund 2. You can put them in Fund 21, which is an annual fund, or you can put them in Fund 22, which is a multi-year fund. Since all that data will be rolled up, if you're going to use that fourth digit as a year, then I would recommend you use the same numbering convention on those district activity funds. But again, none of those projects are set by KDE. It's just the 7XXX series, and then locally you make those decisions.
Okay, very good. Okay, any other questions, comments?
We do not have any other questions right now.
Okay. If you do have questions after this is over, just go ahead and send those to my email address, and we'll get those taken care of. Again, we appreciate everything that districts do. We know that there's so much that goes on and so many changes, but we do recognize the work that you do, and we are trying to develop, or try to develop as easy a way to transition these new project numbers as possible. But if you have questions, just send those to my email address, and we'll get back with you as soon as possible. And we'll also be sending out a link to the webcast. So, okay. Thank you very much.